Hey guys, welcome to the Awakened State. I am Ashley, your host of Awaken and Manifest Your Best Life. So today I wanted to do something a little bit different. We're now merging the YouTube and the podcast. And basically, I wanted to share kind of a little bit of a June update and talk a little bit about 3 key lessons that I learned on my spiritual journey that honestly, I wish I would have known at the beginning. So if I was a spiritual beginner or if I was new to spiritual awakening, these are the top 3 lessons that I wish I would have known at the beginning to really propel me forward on my own awakening journey where I didn't feel like I needed to trial and error everything. Like there's so much growth that happens when we do trial and error. But at the same time, I really wish there was like a roadmap or a guide or something that was easy to access that would have helped me on my journey. And there really just wasn't. There was not, 12 years ago, there was not anything like we see all these new age terms. Now everything's like trending, we have all of this stuff trending, like where you see like crystals at Target now. This stuff was not normal 10 years ago, let alone 12 years ago. And I think it's interesting how now, like, I have such a perspective shift on spiritual awakening that I can share that really profoundly. And it's funny because I was just recently watching something about how this famous YouTuber, she was like, I want to share what I wish I would have known like 10 years ago before I started YouTube. And I found it so enlightening because it's only about 2 or 3 years into my own YouTube journey. And I just really loved that perspective shift on like, wow, this person really gets it. And she's telling me things that I never even thought about before because she's been on the platform way longer than me. So I kind of wanted to do a little bit of a twist on kind of an episode like that, but with spiritual awakening. So stay tuned. Okay, and we are back. Hey guys! So this is a fresh episode of the podcast, welcoming in June. How has it been? So here's one of the things. I believe that one of the things I've just been coming full circle with is I've been really revisiting my foundation. For a while, I really wanted to talk on manifestation, and then I just kept noticing that, have you ever had those moments where it's like you keep ignoring your destiny, but then it just keeps showing itself to you? Or you keep ignoring your purpose, but then it just keeps showing itself to you? Like, there's always this saying in the coaching world. It's like everyone who literally says, I'm going to give up coaching. And then the joke is, oh, sure, okay. But now you're just going to start coaching your friends, your spouse, your partner, your family. Because coaching doesn't ever leave you if you're a real coach. You basically just change the way you're coaching. Like, it's a part of you. So it's like, it's funny how I really feel like, spiritual awakening has been so ingrained in me that I can't shut up about it. I literally cannot shut up about it. And I think part of that I've been like coming to terms with in terms of like, this is part of my purpose work to talk on spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening. And it's funny because right as I was having that realization, I had like this really bad hate mail come in. And it was like, what do you think you're doing sharing your experience of spiritual awakening with other people? Their experience is unique to their pathway. And it's like, yes, of course it is. That's the whole fucking point. But there are similarities. There is common symptoms that everyone experiences. There is also very synchronistic common occurrences that happen to everyone during their spiritual awakening, such as dark night of the soul, ego death, identity crisis. All of these things happen to everyone in the entire journey. And I think over the years, my perspective has shifted so profoundly on this topic. And I just think it's so fascinating because before it used to be very almost, I don't want to say egocentric, but it was very much like there was a separation happening where I felt this immense, like kind of like always trying to seek something, trying to seek enlightenment, trying to seek ascension, trying to seek something. And then over the years, I feel like I've really stepped away from that. And it's been more about embodiment and really like embodying the principles of enlightenment, embodying the principles of spirituality. And, you know, they always say in yoga, it's about always taking yoga off of the mat and getting to a point of you're practicing the asanas and everything so deeply that you're living those principles off the mat. And I think when it comes to really looking at spiritual awakening as a whole, there comes a point of awareness where you have to acknowledge that. And you have to stop being in this energy of always seeking. And I think we go through that to experience a deep level of healing and growth. And I think it's a beautiful thing to have that level of being the spiritual seeker, because that's how you learn the most. That's how you learn the most about who you are. That's how you learn how to heal. That's how you learn like your core gifts and your intuitive gifts. And, you know, I think it's very powerful to say that when it comes to spiritual enlightenment, even when it happens to you, you still go on the next day and live your life. So when you finally reach the top of the mountain, yeah, of course, it's going to feel fucking orgasmic and amazing and incredible and blissful and euphoric. But then the next day you wake up and then you have to live your life. And then you have to deal with that. Then you have to integrate that into your experience, into who you are, and start applying that. So it's like when I always get these like really weird hate mails, like, you know, how dare you share your experience? And it's like, why shouldn't I share my experience? There are things that I know that I really wish I wish someone would have told me 10 years ago. It would have helped so much to not have so much anxiety, so much feelings of like mental disturbance where I felt crazy. It would have helped me so much feel way more emotionally secure in my body and safe in my body, that it was normal to experience a spiritual awakening. And it's like, when you say things like that to me, that just makes me want to not shut up even more, because there are people out there who still are freaking out on the basics where they think they're crazy because they're having a spiritual awakening. And unfortunately, that's part of the process. Unfortunately, that is part of the ego death. Like, that is part of the old you dying and being reborn. And so I think it's important to touch on that, because I don't care if you send me hate mail about that, because for me, I find it so incredible that at this point in the game, I have such a profound awareness of the journey that I can help people successfully navigate the journey. And that's one of the realizations I've really been coming to, is you can't ignore your destiny forever. You can't ignore your purpose forever. And I think a part of my purpose is really explaining that and sharing that. And I'm writing a book on that, and there's going to be an amazing book released. I'm keeping myself accountable. I still have to. I am on like chapter 4, but it is happening. It is happening. So with that being said, if you're a spiritual beginner, if you're new to spiritual awakening, welcome, welcome. And most importantly, you don't even know all of the amazing, incredible transformations, healing, epiphanies, amazing growth you're going to experience on this journey, because it's an incredible journey. And what makes me so sad is how everyone says that, you know, it's like ascension is all about suffering, and how spiritual growth is all about, you know, pushing through your pain. And sure, maybe, you know, pain does lead to growth in some ways. Absolutely. You know, our negative stories often reveal our positive strengths. And I think a lot could be said there, but and polarity exists, of course, in all of us, because, you know, you can't have negative without a positive. But at the same time, there's so many people out there that I see that are just like kind of living in almost a victim mentality with their ascension symptoms or with the process, and thinking that, oh, this is just how it is. And I've met many people out there who are like that, where it's just like, well, this is just another wave of ascension, so I better buckle down and handle it. And that you don't have to live that way. And it's ridiculous that that's almost brainwashed into people who either follow certain teachers or who focus on certain mentalities, that, you know, it's all just about either suffering to reach enlightenment, or it's this mentality of like, you know, the Jesus dying on the cross situation. And I hate to be so blunt like that, but it exists. It really exists. And so I think it's important to touch on, you know, there is a beautiful side of spiritual awakening. You know, you can start to own your intuitive gifts, your power, your intuition, your manifesting capabilities. There's so much beauty inside of spiritual awakening. And one of the things I've really been doing really just over the past 3 months is, as I'm starting to write this book, I've just been really revisiting some of these things. And it's interesting how it has that spiral staircase effect where it's like, wow, I wasn't even seeing it like that before, but now it makes so much more sense. So I want to share with you what are the 3 lessons that I wish I would have known from the start of my journey. The first lesson that I wish I would have known at the start of my journey is that it's normal. It's normal, and it's okay. And it's okay that you have all of these feelings inside of you where you feel crazy, you feel off, you feel wrong. It feels like your entire world is flipping upside down and you're not sure why. It's normal to feel this way at the turning point of transformation and growth. If you think about how all things, when they go through a stage of growth, if a child goes through a stage of growth, they experience growth pains. They literally experience growing pains. You know, they've even have documents that when you have growing pains, sometimes they physically hurt your body because your bones are literally growing. So that growth pain is a part of the process, but how our mind processes it is something that's abnormal and unfamiliar to our ego. So when we feel so like out of body with all of these changes that are happening to us on that physiological level, where we're having a mental, emotional, physical changes occurring in our body, it's important to just ease your nervous system to know that it's normal. It's normal that growth is going to have growing pains, but it's also normal to see that I don't want to say it's part of the process, but it's part of you growing into your next level self. And so when you start to embrace that concept of growing into the next level, you have that period of growing pains that occur. And, you know, it's kind of just like they say, you know, when it comes to labor, there's always contractions. Yeah, because you're growing a human and getting ready to birth something. You're getting ready to birth a human. So it's like in the same regard, you're birthing a new you. And it's so important if you're new to spiritual awakening and you're new to the process, I just want you to hold the fact that what you're feeling internally, what you're mentally feeling, what you're emotionally feeling, it's normal to feel that way because your ego is going through its own personal ego death of the old identity. So of course, naturally, you're going to have negative emotion and resistance towards allowing yourself to be in the new unfamiliar territory. It's kind of like really looking at like if you are, what's a good analogy? If you're like single and you've never been in a relationship before, but you decide that you're finally going to commit to a new relationship. So before, the single you, the person who's never had a relationship, the person who's never even had sex, or maybe even hasn't even been kissed before, is wildly different than the person who is like in a committed relationship with somebody. Those two worlds are wildly different worlds. It's like you always say, like, being a single girl is like way different than being a mom. Holy crap. That's a totally different dynamic entirely, because the paradigm that you're operating under is wildly different. And that's because you just never experienced it before, right? So if you've never experienced it before, then it's going to feel a little bit scary, unsafe, unfamiliar, abnormal. Well, spiritual awakening is the same thing. If you've never experienced something before, and yet you are changing physiologically, mentally, emotionally, and physically, then of course, naturally, it's going to feel the same way as if you're jumping into a totally different reality, because you are. So it's important to recognize it's normal. You're growing, you're safe, and it's okay to feel what you need to feel in that period, because that is ultimately what will help you, is realizing it's okay, it's normal. The second thing I would say is to question your ego. To question your ego. One of the hugest lessons that has stood the test of time with me has been to stop shaming the ego, to stop fearing the ego, to stop suppressing the ego. And I'll tell you what, the people who say high vibe only, those people behind the scenes probably have emotional meltdowns, drastic fights with their loved ones, or probably are drastically suppressing their emotions. So the people who are telling you high vibe only and to be positive all the time, behind the scenes, those people are having emotional meltdowns, emotional breakdowns, burning out, or probably super reactive because they're not letting their emotions be free. One of the hugest principles I teach in a lot of my courses, especially the chakra course, is it's all about emotional liberation. Emotional liberation is how you finally take back control of your own emotions. It's through emotional intelligence, and it's also through stopping suppressing the emotions so that they can be released and freed, essentially. And so this mentality of questioning your ego really helps hone in on that, and it allows you to see that when you are owning your emotions and you start to question your ego, you start to realize that the ego is just your identity. So the ego wants to keep you safe. And so one of the hugest lessons on the spiritual awakening path is to question your ego and to realize that, there's a saying, your ego is actually your amigo. Because if you think about it, your ego is just showing you where you need to do the work. The ego is actually showing you where you need to do the work. If I ever feel randomly like upset or annoyed, I'm like, okay, what is going on? What do I need to see? What am I refusing to see? What's going on? Because usually when you are triggered, when you are more negatively triggered or emotionally reactive, those are all signs from your intuition, your body, showing you that there's work to be done, showing you that there's something off, there's some misalignment going on behind the scenes. And when you start to question that, you start to knock it unconscious and back conscious. So the more you start to question your ego, you start to take something that was unconscious and you bring it into conscious awareness. So the hugest lesson that I wish I would have had from the get-go was, instead of being brainwashed to be like, oh, I need to suppress my negativity, I need to suppress my low vibes so I can be high vibe. This mentality really held me back so much because it made me be in that realm of toxic positivity. And because of that, I did have the emotional meltdowns. Like, I did have an explosion of emotion would happen because I was so focused on trying to be in the high vibe state that it felt like I was micromanaging my energy and my vibrations. And then eventually I was like a cork bottle that just kind of exploded, because that's what happens. Because if you're not fully allowing yourself to accept those emotions, to let them move through you, and to, essentially really, like, for example, one of the hugest things is I talk about how I've really healed my relationship with anger. And I realized the hugest problem was it wasn't even the anger itself. It was the fact of beating myself up about the anger. So I wouldn't accept the anger. I would say it was bad. It's wrong. It's bad to be angry. And so that perpetuated the cycle. And so actually it was all about the acceptance of the emotion that freed the emotion. And so when you question your ego, what is happening is you're starting to bring something that was unconscious to conscious awareness. And through that, you allow yourself to be more in harmony with your own emotions. So what's the third thing? The third lesson I would say is to reconnect to higher self. The hugest thing that has helped me so much that I wish I would have just known from like 2012 onward was developing my relationship to higher self. Without a question. There were periods of time where I would be channeling and writing all these crazy things, and like I wasn't even knowing what I was doing. So it was like just kind of random and haphazardly, like channeling and like really bizarre things. And over time, I really learned that what that was is I was just communicating to higher self. And I was communicating like through almost like this foreign language, some call it light language, but it was more like these random channeled messages would just fly out of me. And I didn't realize that what I was doing is I was connecting to higher self. So developing my relationship to higher self with my spiritual practice was key for me. It wasn't doing the meditations excessively and religiously. It was developing the relationship to my higher self. Because when I started developing my relationship to my higher self, it didn't matter what spiritual practice I did. And I think that's a huge differentiation for so many people, because it shows you that what you're doing when you're really meditating, what you're doing when you're doing yoga and all of these modalities is you're actually connecting to higher self. So the more that you find your own personal relationship with higher self, your soul, God, higher consciousness, this will help you the most on your journey, because it's helping you tap into those higher planes of consciousness, which is essentially higher truth or higher perceptions of reality. So the more you're allowing yourself to tap into that, you're literally communing one with the quantum. You're in alignment with your higher self. So if you're in alignment with your higher self, you naturally make better decisions. You're naturally tapped into your intuition. You're safe in your body. You feel more regulated in your nervous system. And so when you start to develop this relationship to higher self, the hugest thing I want to say here is you're no longer drastically attached to the ego mind. So you're no longer attached to the survivalistic mind, and you start to notice that there's a higher mind. So this is something I talk a lot about in my newly released free series, which is the Spiritual Awakening Roadmap. And this is something we're going to talk heavily in the monthly membership as I start to release new bundles. And basically, there's the difference between the higher mind and the lower mind. And so the lower mind is all about your survival mind. It's like your lizard brain. And then your higher mind is more about your soul, your higher self, quantum intelligence, 5D consciousness. So the more you start to develop your relationship with higher self, you're starting to nurture the higher mind. And most of us are only operating from the lower mind. And so when we start to have these identity crisis and we start to have like this realization that there's something else that we didn't even know, we're starting to tap into those spiritual planes of consciousness. So we're starting to essentially bridge the gap between the lower mind and the higher mind. So one of the hugest lessons for me that I wish I knew from the get-go was to start developing my relationship with higher self from the beginning, because that would have strengthened my ego faster. It would have allowed me to really have an acceleration of growth because I'd be more tapped into the higher mind, and I'd also stop fixating on that survivalistic mind, which is what breeds scarcity and, more negative self-talk and this mentality of there's never enough, I'm never enough, being in that survivalistic scarcity consciousness, which is, part of what the evolution of spiritual awakening is all about, is we're moving away from that scarcity survivalistic mind and we're evolving into a higher plane of consciousness. And the thing that's just always been repeatedly processed and coming through has been that is what really the goal is about. It's about learning to bridge the gap between the higher mind and the lower mind so that you're literally creating heaven on earth by merging what you're downloading from higher planes of consciousness back into the earth. So it's like you are the vessel. You're downloading the intuition, the channeling, the messages, all of those things, just like I'm doing right now. And you're taking that and you're translating it out and you're merging it and you're bridging the gap back to your ego, back to higher self. And so higher self is now merging with the earth plane. And so one of the hugest epiphanies I've had is I remember having this vision of seeing all of these hands on the ceiling, and these hands were trying to find their way to the floor. And this process was like really mind-blowing because it was like, what? That's so bizarre. And then I started to have this vision of like seeing the hands coming to the earth, and the hands were like from the ceiling, as if like higher self was starting to come down into the earth. And then I started to see that, multiple higher selves coming down to the earth plane. And I was seeing it from this very specific perspective, where it's because I'm getting too visual. That always happens. Whenever you see me stuttering, it's because I'm like way too visual. It's just part of who I am. And when you think about it like that, it's like you're starting to create the emergence from higher mind to lower mind. So it's like the lower mind is almost like it's merging with the higher mind and creating that unity consciousness that everyone talks about. So it's like, I guess I'm like way in a tangent here, but basically what I'm trying to get at is when you think about reconnecting to higher self and developing your relationship with higher self, I invite you to ask yourself, how do I do that? What resonates with me to reconnect to my higher self? And to start to look at that from a lens of, is it meditation? Is it channeling? Is it sitting in bed early in the morning in silence? Is it mindfulness? Is it gardening? Is it walks? You have to find what's good for you. And so when you start to look at how you can personally reconnect to higher self, it will be unique to who you are because it's your higher self. And from that experience, you can start to realize that essentially what you're doing is you're merging the higher mind and lower mind. And if that's like way over your head, just know that it's about you bridging the gap between your spiritual self and your physical self. And that's really the journey of spiritual awakening as a whole. So I'm going to summarize this up now. So if you're still with me, basically I want to say we have a spiritual awakening roadmap that breaks down this entire concept, but way more in depth. And I created a unique series that's called the Spiritual Awakening Roadmap 5-day series, where you can start to learn how to increase your intuition, incredible clarity on the spiritual awakening journey, learn the top 5 core phases that you can learn how to, what I've personally seen and witnessed over, 12 years now, over just the 5 common phases that we experience during spiritual awakening. And really it dives heavily into how you can step into action in each of those phases if you're getting stuck in a particular phase. I give you kind of like a quick step action that you can immediately do to start shifting that. Finally, I also want to say that we have the monthly membership, and it is officially opening for enrollment very, very, very soon. I'm looking at probably either, if this video goes out we're looking at least a week or two. It's coming. It is coming. It is coming. It is coming. So the monthly membership is the Soul Aligned Life Academy. It's going to be all about how to navigate spiritual awakening successfully. There are 5 core framework places where we're going to be going over into the depths of soul alignment and how to personally navigate spiritual awakening by opening up yourself to living more from a place of soul alignment. And this information will be coming out over the next week or two. Finally, I think I've said most of what I wanted to say, but I would love to hear your own thoughts about these 3 lessons. And I'd love to know, if you are not a beginner and you're tuning into this episode, what were your top 3 lessons that you've learned since starting your spiritual awakening? I would love to know, because everyone's different. So I would love to know that. So leave a comment down below, and I'll drop the links for the roadmap and the membership. And I'll see you guys next time.